Okay, so let's reiterate a little that I've been disjointedly talking about my fetish with trying to get some of these barrels to nut up. Just a few minutes ago I was explaining some things about the Nuvo action that I like and dislike. Dislikes included the fact that I can't get a good barrel wrench for it. A barrel wrench that I feel is stout enough. I made one. I took a wrench and milled it and machined it so that it fits the action. And I've got barrels on and off, but every time I use it I'm afraid it's going to slip. The action is sticky. The action, forget what I just, the action is slippery. It's the opposite of sticky. It's melanited. I've used rosin. I've got a few tricks and methods that I've used to make it, I think, useful. But the problem that I have is that I want to torque barrels tightly and I don't want them moving. So we're going to formulate something. I videotaped myself setting up and indexing a barrel in the lathe using what's been commonly called the Gordy method here a few days ago, and chambered up a couple of barrels and showed some repeatability and got some results that I was happy with, and I was all pumped and I was going to go release these on YouTube. And I started a channel and the whole thing, and during the setup process it was pretty much driven home to me that my fears about copyrights and music in the background and stuff were justified and were realized, and that I can't really publish the content that I recorded. And that's a real bummer, because it really threw a kink into my plan here. It's just going to push everything back. So I changed directions. I went this way, I went that way. I decided, okay, now I'm going to start again with some of the information, because I inadvertently found out something about the nutting system that I've been using that kind of drove me up the wall. What I'm going to do now is, first of all, I want to explain, I want to tell you again why I'm so fixated on getting this nutting thing to work. Hopefully we got the light to work. Let me change this a little bit. This camera has got some light gathering capacities that are just astounding. And I've been fighting with lighting because of my own ignorance, not because of any deficiencies in the camera. So I'm going to stay right here by the barrel rack, so that I've got 30 barrels laying here. In short, I'm having trouble getting the Nuvo to tighten down the way I want it to. I've had success at it, but I'm worried that at one point that the cobbled together wrenching system that I have for the action is going to fail and slip and either scratch the action or slide over and hit the scope base, because when I put down a scope base, I don't just screw it down. I don't just glue it down. To me, a proper scope base should be pinned or machined into the top of the action. There's problems with every system, everything. I mean, the Kelbleys have really got it close with what they've got, because they're machining the rails integral with the action. They're doing everything in the single setup. The only thing that scares me a little bit is that the aluminum clad actions have a specific purpose, and that's for lightweight, short-range bench rest stuff, and I'm playing with some bigger stuff, and it's more important that I be able to wrench it down. To me, right, wrong, indifferent, that's not the point. So my goals with this nutting thing, I call it a nutting thing, and I have to be really clear that when I'm talking about a nutting thing, I'm just saying that I'm trying to use the barrel nut system. And I have some what I consider to be valid reasons for it. The single biggest one is the fact that I could put a barrel in my barrel vise, spin the nut on, run the action up to where I want it, index the, and when I say index, this isn't about indexing the barrels, that's a different issue that we're dealing with. But set everything exactly where I want it, and then crank that. I make an inch 350 barrel nuts because I want a heavy shoulder against the action. And again, I think there's some valid reasons. The Nuvo is an inch 350 action. Most of the commonly available barrels, when you just go to buy a barrel, are either inch 2 or inch 250, which has been supremely adequate for PPC power generation, I guess, recoil generation, flex generation. It's pretty much finished science that you can put together a lightweight 6 PPC using an inch 2 barrel shoulder. Now, in my experience, if you take it on and off and on and off and on and off, that shoulder tends to deform a little bit, and so the barrel index is back just slightly differently each time. So, and also there's always a chance of galling an action face. Stainless on stainless is a scary thing. I use some I even use lead sometimes, lead-based anti-seize. I use good greases. But to torque them down hard, I'm always a little bit worried about that tiny little shoulder abutment. So I'd like to be able to buy the inch 2 and inch 250 barrel blanks because they're always available. I'd like to protect the action face from galling or wearing or other damage. I'd like to be able to wrench the barrel tight using wrenches that don't impinge on impact or go inside of the action, so that they're using the locking lugs as a wrench. I want to be able to adjust the headspace. Now, when I say adjust the headspace, I'm not talking about go gauges and thousandths and what have you. I'm saying that for indexing, and headspace over time can change a little. Threads wear. Taking barrels on and off means that every time you take it on and off, it mashes the threads down a little more, wears the threads a little more, wears the mating surface. And I'm not saying barrels have to come on and off and on and off. I'm saying that when I take them on and off, they never go back exactly the same. And I've done the whole thing for years. You mark it, you put a scribe mark on it, you go back to your index point. That's all well and good. That's all fine. And especially with a large abutment shoulder, it's okay. But between the shape of the Nuvo action, I'm not picking on the Nuvo here. It's a lovely action. I'm just looking for a better way to get a nice tight barrel on it and to get an inch 350 shoulder, or a minimum an inch 3 or an inch 250 shoulder. But I don't like running an inch 2 shoulder right up into that end of that action face and then mashing it, and it kind of deforms its way in there. Yeah, it locks up tight, but then you got to do it again, and you got to do it again. So I've come up with a novel way, a completely different way. I'm going to try to make some, essentially, I think I've got a recoil lug laying right here. I do a lot of really, really big guns, and I use a lot of these big, wide machined recoil lugs. And the first thing I do is I set these on a shoulder that is so tightly fitted that I have trouble getting them on. I may have to, out here in the shop especially, at least warm them up with my hands just to get them on. I don't mind if one comes out so tight that I have to heat it a little bit. Throw it under hot water. I got a sink right here. I throw it under hot water just to get it on the shank, so that when I tighten this into the face of the action, tighten the barrel down, this can't slide up and down because threads rotate. They need that square shoulder abutment to not shift back and forth. And I have formulated I was challenged here recently by somebody who said that the whole gritter's method, the whole indexing method, the whole method of putting the stuff in the lathe is not so much about the way the indication works, because I'm ambivalent. If I can reach in far enough with a dial indicator or with a test indicator to get the results that I want, that's fine. But barring that, if I'm in too far, or if I want to map the bore even further ahead than the lead, which is important to me, just finding the lead is one thing. I can reach in and just find that. And I go back and ascertain after I'm all done. A lot of times I'll go in and bump the lead and okay. I can reach the lead, especially with a long stemmed indicator after the chamber is cut. I can reach in and check the lead, but I can learn just as much by throwing the bore scope in there and looking at it and seeing the way it's cut. Maybe not. Maybe sometime I'll get one that wallers out and it looks perfectly even all the way around and it looks great, but it's not. I don't know. I personally have never run across that. So, to me, if I'm going to play with the idea of pointing barrels where I want them, which I've been doing for long enough now that I don't ever see myself not doing that, then I need this indication method in there. And this, several people, not just this guy, but there's always been people on the internet say, number one, it's not repeatable. Number two, it's a waste of time. Number three, the really biggest thing is that when you put it in the action, you're bending the barrel. You're not getting anything repeatable. You're basically just fooling yourself. That's been the contention all along, is that those of us who think that we're putting barrel in. So I was challenged to do a barrel, and immediately after that pull the barrel out of the lathe and build a fixture. Stick a fixture in there, turn it, thread it, chase it, clean it up, face it off, do my best to make something that's locked in the lathe chuck and is there for a reference, and then in an uninterrupted video pick up that barrel that I was just working on and screw it in there and take readings off of it and find out if there's anything relevant, find out if anything repeated at all. I did all of that. I did a couple of barrels, and then I took a whole bunch of other barrels and I screwed them into my fixture because the fixture was in the lathe, and learned a bunch of stuff. But unfortunately I learned something about the nutting barrel nut situation that disturbs me greatly. I've got entire projects, I've got, oh man, thousands of dollars worth of barrels here that I've set up for nutting systems on nice expensive guns. And Harold Vaughn introduced me to didn't introduce me to a concept, but he clarified a concept that he calls the old engineer's trick. He talked about the fact that we've got arguments going all the time about how the me-plat affects the stability or the ability of a bullet to stabilize or its ballistic coefficient or any of a number of things, but they're just arguments, they're just people. So the biggest contention was whether or not we should tip our bullets, whether or not we should buy a tool and cut the bullets off or squeeze them down or modify them in such a way as to make all the ogives the same, because it stands to reason that when that thing's plowing through the atmosphere. So the old engineer's trick comes into play. He said, well, let's take some bullets and file them off at an angle and go shoot them and compare them. By the same token, you talk about the crown. I'm anal about crowns. I feel that the crown of the barrel is very important. So he said, well, let's go out there and saw some off at an angle. Let's saw it and saw it and saw it and saw it and saw it. Let's exacerbate the problem. Make the problem bigger, because all of these problems, when you're dealing with 10th minute accuracy or anything under a quarter, every problem's in the weeds. I mean, there's nothing that leaps. So you've got to go through the weeds and pick out the jewels that are hiding down in there and isolate these things. So I built this isolation fixture and I moved forward with that, but it opened up another whole can of worms. Worse than that, because my taping was done with the music playing, I don't know when I'm going to be able to share that with you, or if I can do it privately or what. But it led me into a whole nother line of inquiry. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to use this fixture again. I've got a great use for it. I've got another thing in the lathe here. Whether you go through the whole process or not, but I'm going to refixture the lathe. And then I've got this whole pile of barrels here. I got, I don't know how many barrels are here, and there's plenty more where those came from. So there's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 or 13 finished barrels right there in that pile. Stuff that I can use for my experiment here. Basically what I need to do is put a fixture back in a lathe and then show you, because this is fascinating, a nice 1.250" butted shoulder, hand tightened, and this is where the Harold Vaughn inference comes into play. He says illustrate the problem or isolate the problem or accentuate the problem by making it worse. So I think it's fair to say that if I have a fixture in the lathe and I hand tighten the barrel into it, and then I go out and shake it around and check it for, if I pull down hard and let go, take a measurement, pull up hard and let go, or not, just leave a dial indicator on it. Is there a difference? Is that barrel sitting here and then moving down here and then moving up here and then moving down here? And there's many different ways to fix that barrel. Did I just say fix? I meant to say affix. There's many different ways to affix that barrel, with the two common ones being screwing it into an abutting shoulder and screwing it into headspace and then tightening a barrel nut. These are common, accepted, everyday things. The other thing, to get back to this recoil lug, when I fit a recoil lug, and I do a lot of them, I actually turn the tenon till this just barely, or doesn't even go on. Sometimes doesn't even. If I can get it to start, I just stop. I just pull away, chuck this away, and then I go ahead with my threading of the tenon, finish it out, get it all ready, and then if this is still fighting to go on, I can polish it a little, I can warm this up, I can do all kinds of things to get this to slip on. But the idea is we don't want this rocking on there, because that promotes that bad joint scenario. And I never set these on the threads. It's common to just thread it in and then put this in there and it's slobbering around on the threads and you tighten it up and it all goes away. Well, yeah, in a quarter minute or less gun, it all goes away. But it doesn't. It's kind of like mirage. Just because you're looking through the scope and you see mirage and you can dial it out, or you can move to a different, set your parallax different, or move the parallax out or in, you can see all this mirage. Just because you can make it disappear in your scope doesn't mean the mirage went away. It's an open question as to whether it's still affecting your sight picture, has it still moved, has it still, I mean, this is a wonderful discussion to have. I don't have any answers on it, but it's something that I am always exploring. But I'm using that just to illustrate. I tell you that to tell you this. The fact that you don't see it or that it's lost in the noise doesn't mean that it's not there. So if there's a 1/10 of an inch of wobble in this system and you're shooting a 3/4 minute gun, yeah, you might not see that 1/10 minute. But that doesn't change the fact that it's still 6-8% of the problem. And yes, to a certain point it's about eliminating the little things, but it's to isolate the little things and know which ones are to be eliminated. True accuracy is the culmination of eliminating all these things. Essentially turning that barrel joint into a welded one-piece unit so that the barrel and the action and the stock all work together, all harmonize, all resonate, they have to do everything together repeatably over and over and over. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make some, I've got a fixture in here, or I've got a piece of stock in here right now. I'm going to turn myself some collars, some little fitted collars that are like a recoil lug with the recoil lug portion off, just little rings, and they're going to be thicker than this, something that I hope, I'm going to still go with like a 1/2 inch. I'm going to get them to slip fit on the threads, and so I'm going to add a third variable here. I'm going to do shouldered barrels in the fixture, do the test. I'm going to do nutted barrels in the fixture, do the test. And then I'm going to try a nutted barrel with this slip fit collar on it. I was going to do reverse cut barrel nuts with a slip fit in one end and threads in the middle and the part that goes over the barrel on the other end. And it's hard, that's all hard to do. You got to start inside when you're doing the internal threading and leave a, you know, this right here, I just drew it up and I ran the analysis with my P-brain, and I honestly think a perfectly fitted ring slid or even driven really tightly onto the threads between the locking nut and the action phase should work well to eliminate or alleviate or lessen that effect of the barrel having the ability to move back and forth. So that's what we're setting up to test now. And I'll get some parts put together here, and we're going to stick a bunch of barrels in the lathe, and we're going to run through this whole test. I've kind of let the whole other thing go by the side of the road for now. I found everything that I needed to know about the repeatability, and it's all there, it's all archived. If I can ever figure out how to, really what I have to do is figure out my editing software, and I can cut the noise out of that and do vocal overlays, and it's just a pain in my hind end, and it's something that I can learn anything, but whether I take the time to do it right now or not, I'm just so excited about. I go 15 different ways, and I've got so many different ways to go with this whole YouTube thing, that right now I need to build some stuff so that I can do some stuff so that I can redo that test anyway, because the fixture's no longer in the lathe. So I'll try to redo that test. I've figured out a way to chamber up some more barrels and not go backwards in the process. I've got some old worn out barrels. I'm going to make up a Fireform barrel. I'm going to make up another, I think I'm going to pop another couple PPCs, because I've got this whole Nuvo project that has only 3 nutted barrels. I set it all up for nutting because I don't want to wreck that action by jamming a crummy wrench into it. I built an action and it's crummy. I built an action wrench and it's crummy. So in the end I'm going to win here, but it's going to take longer than I anticipated, as most things do. So we'll see on the other side.